part 2 of today's theology video. So here goes. Last part 1 was focusing more on Christianity, the beliefs of Christianity. Here we go with part 2, and hopefully you get a bit more of diverse view on theology. So here we go. Now, theology translates into English from the Greek theology, which derives from theos, meaning God, and logi, meaning utterance, sayings, or oracles, a word related to logos, meaning word, discourse, account, or reasoning, which had passed into Latin as theologia and into French as theology. English equivalent being theology, which had evolved from 1362. And the sense of the word in English depends on the large part on the sense of Latin and Greek equivalents had acquired in patriistic and medieval Christian usage, although the English term has spread beyond Christian contexts. Whereas the definition sentence, Augustine of Hippo defined the Latin equivalent theologia as reasoning or discussion concerning the deity. Richard Hooker defined it as theology in English as the science of things divine. The term can however be used for a variety of different disciplines or fields of study. Now, theology can begin with the assumption that the divine exists in some form, such as physical, supernatural, mental, or social realities, and evidence for and about it may be formed via personal spiritual existence and or historical records of such experience as documented by others. The study of these assumptions is not really a part of theology proper, but is found in the philosophy of religion, increasing through the psychology of religion or neurotheology. Theology then aims to structure and understand these experiences and concepts and use them to derive normative being normal prescriptions of how to live our lives. Now, theologians have used various forms of analysis and arguments experimental, philosophical, and ethnographic, historical, and many more to help understand, explain, test, and critique, defend, or promote any religious topics, many religious topics, and the philosophy of ethics and case law. Arguments often assume the existence of previously resolved questions and develop by making analogies from them to draw interference in new situations. And the study of theology may help theologians more deeply understand their own religious traditions as others' religious traditions, or may enable them to explore the nature of divinity without reference to any specific tradition. And theology may be used to propagate, reform, or justify religious tradition, or may be used to compare, challenge biblical criticism, or oppose a religion or a religious tradition or worldview. And theology might also help the theologian to address some present situation or need through a religious tradition, or explore possible ways of interpreting the world. Now, in its history, the Greek theology was used the meaning of discourse on God in the 4th century BC by Plato. In the Republic, Book 2, Chapter 18, Aristotle divided theological philosophy and mathematics, physics, and theologic, with the last corresponding roughly to metaphysics, which Aristotle included discourse of the nature of the divine. Now, drawing on Greek sources the Latin writer Varro distinguished 3 forms of such discourse, mythical, like concerning myths of like the Greek gods, like rational which is like philosophical analysis of the gods, and of cosmology and civil where it concerns like the rights and duties of public religious observation. Theologos is related to like theology, and appears in some biblical manuscripts in the heading of the Book of Revelations. Apocalypse Ione toi Theology, the revelation of the John of the Theologos. Sorry if I mispronounced it. Where, however, the words refer not to the John the Theologian in the modern English sense of the word, but using slightly different sense of the root logos, meaning rational discourse, but word or message. And one who speaks like the words of God, ingoi toi theoi, and some Latin Christian authors tell us Tertullian and Augustine, sorry if I mispronounced it again, follow Varro's threefold usage, although Augustine also used the term more simply to mean reason or discussion concerning the deity. And like patristic Christian source theologia could refer to like narrowly to devout and inspired knowledge of or teaching about the essential nature of God. The Latin author like Boethius, sorry if I mispronounced that, writing in the early 6th century, he used theologia to note a subdivision of philosophy as a subject of academic study dealing with the motionless incorporeal reality as like opposed to physica, which deals with corporal moving realities. Bonifacius definition influenced medieval Latin usage. In scholastic Latin sources, the term came to denote the rational study of the doctrine of the Christian religion, more precisely the academic discipline investigating the coherence and implication of language and claims of the Bible and other books, and the theological tradition, and the latter often presented in Peter Lombard's sentence, a book of extracts from the Church Fathers, like in the Renaissance, especially with Florentine Platonist, apologetist of Dante's Poetics, the distinction between like poetic theology, Theologia Poetica, and revealed or biblical theology serves as like stepping stones for the revival of philosophy as an independent of theological authority. In the last sense, theology is an academic discipline involving rational study of Christianity. Christian teaching is that the term passed in English in the 14th century, although it could also be used in a narrow sense found in Bonifacius and the Greek patristic authors to mean the rational study of the essential nature of God. This course now sometimes called theology proper. From like 17th century onwards, it became possible for the term theology to refer to study of religious ideas and teachings that are not specifically Christian. In the terms that natural theology, which denoted theology based on reasoning from natural facts, independent of Christian revelation, or not specific to another religion. Like theology, in a sense, to derive sense of meaning, like a system of theoretical principles and impractical origin. There's this tablet scaring me. In like various religions, the term theology has been deemed by some as only appropriate that worship a supposed deity of like more widely than monotheism, and presuppose a belief in the ability to speak and reason about this deity in Logia. The suggestion in the term is less appropriate in like religious contexts that are organised differently, like religions without a single deity, or that deny the subjects can be studied logically, like Theology has been proposed as an alternative, more generic term. And like Jewish theology, the historical absence of a political authority has meant that most theological reflections have happened within the context of Jewish community and synagogues, rather than with special academic institutions, including like the rabbinical discussion of Jewish law and Jewish biblical commentaries. Like historically, it has been very active and highly significant for Christian and Islamic theology, as well as for Judaism. And for like Christianity, which we've talked a lot about already, Christian theology is like the study of Christian belief or practice. Like the study concentrates primarily upon like the texts of like the Old and New Testaments, as well as on Christian tradition. Christian theologies are biblical exegesis, rational explanation and argument. Theology might be undertaken to help the theologian better understand like the Christian tenets and make comparisons between Christianity and other traditions, to defend Christianity against objections and criticism, to facilitate reforms in the Christian church, to assist in the propagation of Christianity, to draw on the resource of like the Christian traditions to address some present situations or needs, and for a variety of like many other reasons. And like Islamic theology discussion of a parallel Christian discussion is named Kalam. The Islamic analogue of Christian theological discussion would more properly be the investigation and elaborate of Sharia, or I forgot where I was up to. Sharia or fiqh. Kalam does not hold a leading place in Muslim thought that theology does in Christianity. To find like equivalent theology in Christian sense, it is not necessary that a resource to several disciplines to the usul or the fiqh as much as to kalam. And so like there's more like start off with like India, like Buddhism, like some academic inquiries of Buddhism dictated that the investigation of a Buddhist understanding of the world prefer the designation Buddhist philosophy to the term Buddhist theology. Since Buddhism lacks the same concepts of theos, Jose Ignacio Cabeza, who argues that the use of theology is appropriate, can only do so, he says, because I take theology not to be restricted to discourse on God. I take theology not to be restricted to a theological meaning. In that latter sense, Buddhism is more atheological, rejecting as it does the notion of God. And then there's Hinduism, which I'm sure many of you will realise isn't monotheistic. It's got there's like many gods in Hinduism, and this tablet is still scaring me. Now, within Hindu philosophy, there is like a tradition of philosophical speculation of the nature of the universe, of God, like the term is Brahman, like Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan in some schools of Hindu thought, and of the soul, of the Atman meaning soul. The Sanskrit word for various schools in Hindu philosophy, the Darshana, meaning like view or viewpoint. Vaishnava theology has been a subject of study for many devotees, philosophers and scholars in India for centuries. A large part of the study lies in classifying and organising the manifestations of thousands of gods in their aspects. In recent decades there's also been undertaken of by a number of academic institutions in Europe, such as like Oxford Centre of Hindu Studies, and the Bhaktivedanta College. Sorry if I mispronounced that. The history of the study of theology in institutions of higher education is as old as the history of such institutions themselves. For instance, Taxli era was an early centre of Vedic learning, possible from the 6th century BC or earlier. The Platonic Academy, founded in Athens in the 4th century BC, seems to have included theological themes in a subject matter. The Chinese Tzu delivered Confucian teachings from the 2nd century BC, and the school of Nisibis was centre of Christian learning from the 4th century AD. Naladana in India was the site of Buddhist higher learning from the 5th or 6th century AD. And the Moroccan University of Al-Qarawiyyin was a centre of Islamic learning from the 10th century, as was the Al-Azhar University in Cairo. Now, the earliest universities were developed under the aegis of Latin Church or by papal bulls as Studia Generalia, and perhaps from cathedral schools. It is possible, however, that the development of the cathedral schools and universities were quite rare, with the University of Paris being an exception, and later were also founded by kings like the University of Naples, Federico II, Charles University in Prague, Jagiellonian University in Krakow. Sorry if I missaid anything or in that, or municipal administration like the University of Cologne and University of Erfurt. And the early medieval period, most new universities were founded from pre-existing schools, usually when the schools were deemed to have become primarily sites of higher education. Many historians state that universities and cathedral schools were a continuation of the interest of the learning promoted by monasteries. Christian theological learning was therefore a component in these institutions, as there was a study of church and canon law. And universities played an important role in training people in ecclesiastical offices, in helping the church pursue the clarification and defence of its teachings, and in support of the legal rights of the church over secular rules. Secular being non-religious kind of thing, or all-inclusive. At such universities, theological study was initially closely tied to the life of faith and of the church, and it fed and was fed by practices of preaching, praying, and celebration of Mass. And during the Middle Ages, theology was therefore an ultimate subject at university, being named the Queen of Science at one point, and serving the capstone of a trivium and quadrivium that young men were expected to study. This meant that the other subjects, including like philosophy, existed primarily with the help of theological thought. So yeah, Christian theology is preeminent place in the university because the universities began to be challenged during the European Enlightenment, especially in like Germany. Like other subjects gained in independence and prestige, and questions were raised about the discipline that seemed to involve commitment to the authority of a particular religious tradition, and institutions that were increasingly understood to be devoted to independent reason. And since like the early 19th century, various different approaches have emerged in the West to theology as an academic discipline. Much of the debate concerning theology's place at the university or within a general higher education curriculum centres on whether like theology's methods are appropriately theoretical or, broadly speaking, scientific, or on the other hand, whether theology requires a pre-commitment of faith by the practitioners and whether such a commitment conflicts with like academic freedoms. And it's like bringing in a little bit of minstrel training. In some contexts, the theology has been held to belong in institutions of higher education primarily as a form of professional training as a form of Christian ministry. And this was the basis on which Friedrich Schleiermacher, sorry for mispronouncing it, a liberal theologian, argued that the inclusion of theology in the new University of Berlin in 1810. And for instance, in Germany, theological facilities at state universities are typically tiered to particular denominations, Protestants or Roman Catholics. Roman Catholic being that you follow the Pope in Rome, and Protestants belong to like other branches of Christianity, like the Greek Orthodox, Church of England kind of thing, Lutheranism. And those faculties were offered denominately bound, known as Coffin Gebelgen degrees. Sorry if I completely botched that. And have denominationally bound public posts among the faculty, as well as contributing to the development and growth of Christian knowledge. They've provided like an academic training for future clergy and teachers of religious instructions at German schools. In like the United States, several prominent colleges and universities were starting in order to train Christian ministers. And this is like Harvard, Georgetown, Boston University, Yale and Princeton all had the theological training of clergy as a primary purpose at their foundation. And like seminaries and Bible colleges have continued this alliance between like the academic study of theology and training for Christian ministry. There are, in some instances, numerous prominent US examples, including Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, like the Graduate Theological Union in Berkeley, Criswell College in Dallas, the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville, Trinity and Evangelical Divinity School in Deerfield, Illinois, Dallas Theological Seminary, North Texas Collegiate Institute in Farms Branch, Texas, and Assemblies of God Theological Seminaries in Springfield, Missouri. As theological in its own right, some contexts the scholars perceive theological as an academic discipline without formal affiliation to like any particular church or religion. Throughout members of staff, as well as affiliations to churches, and without focus on ministerial training and can apply to many university departments in many instances in the UK, including like the faculties of divinity at the University of Cambridge, at the University of Oxford, the Department of Theology and Religious at the University of Exeter, and the Department of Theology and Religious Studies at the University of Leeds. Now, like traditional academic prizes such as the Universities of Aberdeen's, Lumsden and Fellowship tend to acknowledge performance in theology or divinity, as it is known at Aberdeen, and in religious studies. And like religious studies, religious studies include contemporary contexts. Is a distinction made between theology, which is seen as involving some like level of commitment to the claims of religious tradition being studied as religious studies, which by contrast is normally seen as requiring that the question of the truth or falsehood of religious tradition studied to be kept outside its field. Religious studies involvement to involve the study of like historical or contemporary practices, or those traditions using intellectual tools and frameworks are not themselves specifically tied to any religious tradition, and that are normally understood to be neutral or secular, in contexts where religious studies in a sense focus on the primary forms of study that can include like anthropology of religion, comparative religion, history of religions, philosophy of religion, psychology of religion, sociology of religions kind of thing. And sometimes theology and religious studies can be seen as like being in tension, and in other times they are held to coexist without serious tension. Okay, and occasionally it is denied that there is any clear boundary between them. And there is like an ancient tradition of skepticism about theology, followed by a more modern rise in secularist and atheist criticism. And like the criticism by philosophers is like whatever or not reason discussed about the divine is possible has long been a point of contention. And like Protagoras, as early as like the 5th century BC, he was reputed to have been exiled from Athens because of his agnosticism about the existence of gods. Agnosticism is about kind of like where you believe in God, might believe in God kind of thing, but don't identify to any religion of sorts. And he said concerning the gods I cannot know either that they exist or that they do not exist, or what they form they might have, for there is much to prevent one's knowing. The obscurity of the subject and the shortness of man's life. Now Lord Bolingbroke, an English politician and political philosopher, wrote in his political work and views on theology. Theology is in fault, not religion. Theology is a science that must justly be compared to the box of Pandora. Many good things lie upmost in it, but many evil lie under them, and scatter plagues and desolation throughout the world. Thomas Paine, Paine, the American revolutionary, who wrote in his 2-part work The Age of Reason, the study of theology as it stands in Christian churches is a study of nothing. It is founded on nothing. It rests on no principles. It proceeds by no authorities, and it has no data. It can demonstrate nothing and admits of no conclusion. Not anything can be studied as a science without being in possession of the principles upon which it is founded. And as this is the case of Christian theology, it is therefore a study of nothing. Now Ludwig Wilbach, An atheist philosopher sought to dissolve theology in his work on principles of philosophy of the future. Said the task of the modern era was the realization of humanization of God, the transformation and dissolution of theology into anthropology. This mirrored his earlier work, The Essence of Christianity, published in 1841, for which was banned from teaching in Germany, in which he had said that theology was a web of contradictions and delusions. A.J. Ayer, the former logical positivist, sought to show that his essay, The Critiques of Ethics and Theology, that all statements about the divine are nonsensical, and the divine attributes is unprovable. He wrote, it is now generally admitted, at any rate by philosophers, that the existence of a being having the attributes which define the God of any non-animistic religion cannot be demonstratively provide. All utterances about the nature of God are nonsensical. Walter Kaufmann, a philosopher, in his essay against theology, sought to differentiate theology from religion in general. Theology, of course, is not religion, and a great deal of religion is emphatically anti-theological. An attack on theology, therefore, should not be taken as necessarily involving an attack on religion. Religion can be, and often has been, untheological or even anti-theological. However, Kaufmann had found that Christianity is unescapably a theological religion. The critics of theology as a academic discipline has dated back to the 18th century, having questioned the suitability of theology as an academic discipline, and in the 21st century they kind of still continue. And Charles Brandler believed that theology prevented human beings from achieving liberty. Brandler noted that theologians of his time stated that modern scientific research contradicted sacred scriptures. Therefore, the scriptures must be wrong to some extent. And Robert G. Ingersoll stated that when theologians had power, the majority of the people lived in hovels, while privileged few had palaces and cathedrals. In Ingersoll's opinion, science rather than theology improved people's lives. Ingersoll had maintained further that trained theologians reason and no better than a person who assumes the devil must exist because pictures resembled the devil so exactly, supposedly. And Mark Twain, we'll probably also a lot of others might have heard about Mark Twain. He stated that several mutually incompatible religions claimed. Yeah? Okay. Claimed to be the true religion, and that people cut the throats of others following different theology. And then Richard Dawkins wrote, the achievements of theologians don't do anything, don't affect anything, don't achieve anything, don't mean anything. What makes you think that theology is a subject at all? Let me know in the comments below on what you think about that quote. That theology is, and about what makes you think that theology is a subject at all. And let me know if you believe in God and morals, and yeah. I'll see you all very, very soon. So yeah, au revoir.